Hi there. I have something I want to share with you that I talked about the other night in Shaping Reality with Kimberly Montgomery. And uh, this is some pieces of what I call the puzzle that I have put together that just kind of came together when I heard something. You'll see. So I'm just going to begin. In the early days of Kundalini, when there was no such thing as sleep, I would often just leave my body, OBE, out of body, and leave the body in bed, because all I did was toss and turn, while I went out and sat on the roof all night. I didn't know what else to do, where to go, so I just sat there. I learned many things in those nights on the roof. But on 3 separate nights, I was invited to experience something that has remained among the most powerful and unforgettable experiences of my life. These were the nights that a trio of light beings came and got me, saying simply, "Come with us." So when I put my hands up and took their hands, they pulled me off the roof and began to fly through space, dragging me along. I don't know if we were actually moving anywhere or if what I was experiencing was this drastic change of frequencies to a higher frequency range. But I took their hands. We began to fly. They were dragging me along, and they moved at what I thought was the speed of light, because I could see light streaking by like you see in the movies. And I wrote about it in my book, The Evolving Human, that I felt like one of those Russian dolls, where there's a whole series of nested versions of the self, each of which was quickly let go of until I got to that last tiny doll in the core of the whole set. So it seemed like we were in motion for a great distance until way off in the distance, I could see this tiny blue dot that we were headed toward. As we got closer, it looked more and more like Earth. And by the time we arrived and sat down very gently on the planet, I was completely caught up in 2 streams of attention at once. One was that the place looked like a perfect duplicate, perfect match, exact replica of the Earth. And the other was a stunning consciousness that pervaded every single blade of grass, every tree, leaf, pebble, brick, flower, drop of water, everything in the entire place. And all of it was greeting me with this joyous welcome, as if we had known each other forever. And they were delighted I was back home. I had different experiences on each of the 3 visits, but all of them were really powerful. I did not know why they took me to that place, and I never understood why I thought it was a duplicate of the Earth. But once in a while, I would ask myself, what was that all about? But there was no answer. So I just put the experiences and the idea of a duplicate Earth in my mental filing cabinet and went about my life. More than a decade went by. And somewhere in the late 1990s, maybe mid 1990s, I'm not even sure, I went with my husband, Jim, to get a quick lunch of burger and fries at a local restaurant. During the lunch, we were talking about what we thought of as the terrible overpopulation problem. That was the talk of the day. So we thought we were up to date and living on the cutting edge of modern thinking. And we were, but it just wasn't the natural result of what we perceived in the course of daily living. Neither of us were aware at that time that all of our perceptions about the population numbers had been seeded shaped and locked into place by the propaganda spilling out of National Public Radio, Time Magazine, television, and other media sources. Anyway, we were sitting in this little restaurant, and in the middle of our conversation about overpopulation, I suddenly heard a clear, calm voice talking in my head that said, "Do not listen to those who say your planet is overpopulated. There are great numbers of people arriving on your planet because they know that Christ consciousness is going to be taught, and they want to be here for the teaching. You will need all of these people because there will come a time in your future when you will need the power of all that consciousness." That was the end of the voice and its message. I shared the message with Jim, and we didn't know what to make of it, but we stopped talking about overpopulation. I wondered what was meant by the part of the statement that said we would need the power of all that consciousness. For what? I wondered. But without an explanation, I put the message in my mental filing cabinet, and I left it there among the other unanswered mysteries I had collected over the years. Time went by, and I continued teaching people to develop and use intuition. I continued my research into consciousness. I also spent 15 years working with Dr. William Levengood, a biophysicist who taught me plasma physics. More than once, he emphasized that everything in existence was made of frequencies, creating charge density plasmas. But for a long time, I did not quite grasp the implications of that. Now and then, I would also hear about the work of Dolores Cannon and the many clients who had been hypnotized and directed to look at the future. Again and again, they reported that the population had split and some of them were going to another Earth. People questioned these reports 6 ways to Sunday, but no one had any explanations that made sense or seemed real. We were supposedly heading toward a new Earth, but that raised so many questions that it too went into my mental filing cabinet, where it was left dangling. Other people, like David Icke, claimed that the Earth was a prison planet, but I knew this was not true. My own research into consciousness had taught me that we were not in a prison. We were in an incubator designed to evolve consciousness to very high levels. Some people called it a matrix, but I had observed something different. I learned a long time ago that humans are responsible for keeping the humanoid form of life alive and functioning. Groups of advanced beings traveled around the cosmos, seeding life in various places and nurturing it to advanced stages of development. We live in a system whose basic design is to maintain itself by moving various forms of consciousness from seedling state to the God state. Those in the incubator learn important lessons before being free to move into systems where everything is much more responsive to consciousness, and in which the slightest thought moves mountains and either builds or collapses form. People were in the incubator to train, evolve, and polish their consciousness, but they were like children playing with a loaded gun. Consciousness is powerful. In 2018, I came across the work of Douglas Vogt, his video series explaining the disaster cycle, and his book, God's Day of Judgment. Vogt explained that the sun underwent a micronova about every 12,000 years, and the effect on our planet was a global catastrophe followed by an ice age. In addition to extensive scientific evidence of the micronova, he also shared that in the ancient Jewish tradition, the day of the micronova was known as God's Day of Judgment. Shortly after discovering that we might be facing a disastrous micronova, I discovered there was also a record of recurring pole shifts. I wasn't sure if the pole shift was related to or part of the micronova, but I thought the pole shift might be easier to survive if it was a separate event. I began to worry about how to survive such massive change. And I came to the conclusion that the only option was to develop consciousness well enough to move into the range of fourth or fifth dimensional existence, something that I hoped would reduce the physical drama and trauma of any disaster we might be facing. In 2019, I warned people about the coming micronova in Volume 4 of the Consciousness and Energy series, but there was almost no response to the warning. So I figured people were either overwhelmed or they thought I was nuts. However, the signs of an approaching pole shift were obvious. So I brought it up again in a live stream, laying out the specific stages leading up to the shift. And I'm sure I upset people. And it upset me to the point of tears to do so. But I couldn't stay silent any longer. A micronova was an extinction level event, but a pole shift was survivable if people were ready. So following the live stream, one of the members of my online community reached out and asked if I wanted to meet and talk about how to prepare. We met, we discussed a wide range of topics to address, and all of this discussion renewed the many questions that I had about how do we move to a fourth or fifth dimensional existence in order to soften the disaster. All of these stories, reports, and pieces of information were only some of the puzzle pieces that I was holding in my mental filing cabinet. I did not think these particular pieces were related, so I had not tried to put them together in a coherent picture. And then, in a fortuitous coincidence, I happened to hear a translation of a Sumerian clay tablet that described a parallel world on a second Earth and a bridge that connected it to our Earth. The tablet was discovered by archaeologist George Smith. It was dated to at least 2400 BC, maybe older. And when Smith translated it, it said that there was a second Earth, a mirrored world with a bridge that connects it to ours. It said that, quote, the great ones created two planets that were connected by a bridge. The bridge was not a physical bridge. It was a dimensional bridge that could be used to cross to another realm. The bridge opened and closed on a regular schedule, and according to the tablet, it was built by a faction of the Anunnaki who disagreed with a decision to limit human consciousness, end quote. According to the tablet, there was a meeting of the great ones who voted to shorten the sight, quote unquote, shorten the sight of humans so that we would not be able to grasp the full reality of our situation. They were afraid that we would stop working if we understood. They were afraid we would remember that there was another Earth where people lived without the limitations of their consciousness. The bridge opens when three astronomical conditions occur. One is a specific alignment of the Pleiades to the ecliptic plane. Another is a specific lunar position in relation to Orion. And the third is the rise of a planet called the Wandering Star. And it rises in a particular or specific quadrant of the sky. The dates of past alignments were also given in the tablet. The first one noted was in 3114 BC, which was the year of the Great Flood. The next one had been plotted. The next bunch had been plotted. And that next one was 1159 BC, which was when the Bronze Age collapsed. 535 AD was to be the next date, and that was a year of darkened skies around the world due to massive volcanic activity. The next date was 1815 AD, the year Mount Tambora erupted and the mud floods occurred. The narrator of the video did not want to give the exact date of the next opening because he felt it would cause trouble. He said it was within the next decade. There were other conditions for the opening of the bridge. One was that the population of Earth had to reach 7.6 billion people. A worrisome condition that they listed, or that the tablet listed, was that the frequency song of the Earth, a humming sound, would go quiet or silent, which is likely a reference to the magnetic field around the Earth, dropping to almost nothing, maybe? Another sign of the opening was that children would begin to remember past lives and bits of memory of the other Earth. When this happened, it said the wall would already be falling. In the last couple of years, there has been a 340% increase in the number of children recalling exact details of their past lives. And the tablet said that, quote, when children remember, members must open the gate willingly or it will open without them, end quote. Other conditions for recognizing the thinning of the wall between the two Earths included changes in weather patterns, changes in animal migrations, and groups of people who would have the same dream. And that is something that's been happening in thousands of people who have reported dreams describing the Tartarian civilization in some detail. Other groups would remember something that was not found in this realm, but would be memories of the second Earth bleeding through. Is that referring to the Mandela effect? The tablet said that the event that triggers the next full opening of the bridge would fall within the lifetime of most people watching or listening to the video. The trigger will look like an accident, a coincidence, or maybe a natural disaster. According to the tablet, at that moment, a specific number of human beings on this earth will simultaneously perform a specific act. Would that be like a mass meditation or prayer? Maybe collective shock or fear? An unintentional act? Something that we just did without really being intentional about it? Whatever it is, this global trigger event causes billions of people to react at the same moment. And this act will thin the wall to the point where the bridge becomes traversable. The tablet also described the process by which individuals could cross the bridge on their own. It gave precise conditions, the location, the timing, the mental state required, but it warned that those who cross successfully will not return. And those who attempt to cross at the wrong time will be, quote, unmade, erased, removed from existence, end quote. Now, in a recent video, I described a sequence of 12 warning signs that we would see when a pole shift was underway. We have now seen 9 of those signals come to pass. One of those signals was a specific alignment of certain stars. The tablets detail that alignment, and when scientists studied those star alignments to see when the next one would occur, it was March 2027. Is the full opening of the bridge in March of 2027? That's pretty close. The tablet describing the signs of the bridge opening are almost the same signs that signal the approaching pole shift. So let's sum up what the tablets say. So when a 4,000-year-old tablet predicts a specific astronomical alignment, ties that alignment to documented historical catastrophes, identifies a population threshold that we just crossed as a necessary condition for us to gather enough energy to push through the wall and cross the bridge, describes shared dreams happening to many people and detailed memories of past lives being reported by children, predicts the Mandela effect in which people remember details differently from what they are in today's world, even though we have no mainstream scientific explanation for that, predicts changes in weather patterns and animal migrations, which we have seen in birds and fish, and points to a date within the next decade. Maybe we should pay attention. It was hearing what the tablet said that triggered a sudden retrieval of puzzle pieces that have been dangling in my mental cabinet for years. The pieces came together in a spontaneous arrangement that formed a coherent picture, one I had never even considered. So, when I add up 3 visits to a place I had no idea existed, escorted by 3 beings of light, to a place that looked like a perfect duplicate of Earth, a conversation about overpopulation that ended when a voice said, "Great numbers of people are arriving on your planet because they know that Christ consciousness is going to be taught, and they want to be here for the teaching." When the voice went on to say, "You will need all of these people because there will come a time in your future when you will need the power of all that consciousness," Dolores Cannon's many clients who consistently reported that the population would split and some people would go to a new Earth. The observation from my own research that our reality system is really an incubator for higher consciousness. The work of Doug Vogt and his discovery of the catastrophe cycle every 12,000 years. That the catastrophe cycle was known by the ancients as the Lord's Day of Judgment. That a Sumerian tablet was telling us there is another Earth and a bridge to it that opens under certain conditions, that those conditions are tied to natural disasters, that the micronova and the pole shift create massive natural disasters, that people who cross the bridge move to an Earth where all the gifts of advanced perception are in full use, that the people who cross the bridge don't come back, that there are New Testament books written by Matthew, book 24, and Luke, book 17, in which both authors describe a day of judgment as a day when two men will be in the field and one will disappear while the other remains. Or two women will be grinding grain and one will be taken while the other is left to face the judgment. I have to ask, does it look like we may have an answer to the question of how do we survive these planetary catastrophes? Does it look to anyone else besides myself that the development of consciousness is the answer? That was my first instinct, but I had no idea how to go about making it happen. Do we really need to know every detail, or do we trust that the way will be opened for us? What if the Anunnaki built something that connects our world to another version of itself? What if they timed that opening to specific astronomical events that occur on a cycle that they understood a heck of a lot better than we do? And what if the wall in our consciousness is real and it's getting thin? I've been teaching about the mind and consciousness for a long time. Something I often tell my students is try stuff. You'll be surprised to find that the universe meets you halfway. Is the discovery of a report about a clay tablet that informs us of a second Earth something we can trust? Is it real? It seems like such a timely thing to come across just when we are asking, how do we prepare? We were thinking preparation involved food, the right location, self-sufficiency, and other physical concerns. But perhaps consciousness is truly the key. At the very least, it would be better to prepare for something that may or may not happen than to be unprepared for something that does happen. Archaeologist George Smith died on 8/18/1876. It's August 18th, 1876. A few days before his birth, he wrote in his journal, quote, "The parallel ground is not myth. They built a doorway and they wrote down when it opens," end quote. So it appears there's another Earth, there is a bridge, and the bridge is opening. Are we ready to move to a new Earth? Think about that. Thank you for listening.